Witness the splendor of the changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace with England's royal guard. Emma stepped out of the small, bustling hotel where she had stayed for the night. She adjusted her scarf and pulled her coat closer around her shoulders. Today was a day she had been eagerly waiting for, the day she would witness the changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace. Her heart raced with excitement, not because it was a famous tourist attraction, but because it was a living piece of history, a ritual that had been performed for centuries, and she wanted to see it with her own eyes. As she walked through the streets toward the palace, Emma noticed the city slowly waking up. Black cabs and red buses moved through the streets with precise rhythm. People hurried along the sidewalks clutching coffee cups, and the distant chiming of Big Ben reminded her that London's heartbeat was steady, measured, and full of tradition. She followed the small stream of other tourists who seemed just as eager as she was. Some were taking photographs with wide smiles, while others were quietly talking among themselves, sharing the excitement of being in such a historic place. When she finally turned the corner and caught her first glimpse of Buckingham Palace, Emma stopped. The building stood majestically, larger and more elegant than she had imagined from pictures. Its creamy stone facade reflected the soft morning light, and the palace gates, painted black and gold, looked both grand and imposing. A sense of awe washed over her. There was something magical about standing in a place that had been central to England's history for hundreds of years. She could almost imagine the kings and queens who had walked through these gates, their footsteps echoing through time. Emma walked closer to the palace gates and joined the gathering crowd. Families, couples, and solo travelers from all over the world were there, their faces glowing with anticipation. Children perched on their parents' shoulders, pointing excitedly at the guards, who stood like statues just a few meters away. Emma couldn't help but smile at the sight. The guards were dressed in their iconic red tunics and tall black bearskin hats, standing perfectly still with their rifles held upright. Their faces were serious, but there was an undeniable dignity in their posture. Even from a distance, Emma could sense the discipline and pride that each guard carried. As she settled into a spot among the crowd, Emma tried to calm her racing thoughts. She had read about the changing of the guard before, but seeing it in person was entirely different. She realized that this ceremony was not just about the uniforms, the music, or the marching. It was about tradition, honor, and dedication. Every movement, every step, and every note of music was carefully timed and rehearsed. Yet it was also alive, performed by real people who had devoted themselves to serving their country in a very special way. A man standing nearby, who introduced himself as a guide for a small group of tourists, began to explain the history of the ceremony. Emma listened intently, absorbing every word. He told them that the tradition dated back to the reign of King Charles II, and that the changing of the guards symbolized the security of the royal family, showing that the guards were always alert and ready to serve. Emma found herself imagining the centuries of guards who had stood in the same position, facing the same gates, and carrying out the same ritual. The thought was almost overwhelming. It was a moment where the past and the present seemed to meet. The crowd began to shift slightly as more people arrived. Emma noticed that everyone was trying to get the best view, some standing on tiptoe, others holding cameras high above their heads. The atmosphere was electric but respectful. People whispered to one another, sharing their excitement, yet there was also a sense of quiet reverence. Emma felt lucky to be part of this moment, surrounded by strangers who all shared the same curiosity and admiration for this extraordinary display. Time seemed to slow as the distant sound of drums and trumpets reached their ears. The music was bold and clear, announcing that the ceremony was about to begin. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She focused on the guards, noticing small details she had never seen in photos: the polished buttons on their tunics, the meticulous stitching on their gloves, the careful shine of their boots. Each guard moved with perfect precision, their expressions unreadable, yet their presence commanding. She realized that the beauty of this spectacle was not only in its visual grandeur, but in the dedication and skill of the people who performed it. Emma's attention was drawn to a young guard standing near the center. Unlike some of the older guards, he seemed slightly nervous, though he maintained his composure flawlessly. She could sense the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Every step he would take, every motion he would perform would be observed by hundreds of visitors. And yet, he stood with pride, aware that he was part of something much larger than himself. Emma admired that silently. It was not an easy task to stand so perfectly still for so long, to move in exact coordination with others, and to maintain a solemn presence throughout. As she waited for the ceremony to begin, Emma looked around at the crowd. People spoke many different languages, but the excitement was universal. Cameras clicked, phones were held high, and some people even sketched the scene in notebooks. Emma smiled at the variety of reactions. Some children laughed quietly at the impressive hats, while adults murmured in awe at the precision of the guards' movements. There was a shared understanding among everyone present that they were witnessing something special, something that could not be captured fully in pictures or videos. Emma took a deep breath and let herself absorb the scene. The palace gates gleamed in the soft sunlight. The guards stood like living statues, and the air was filled with a sense of anticipation that made her pulse quicken. She thought about the countless people who had stood in the same spot over the years, watching the guards perform the same ceremony, feeling the same mixture of excitement and respect. It was a connection across time, a reminder that history was not just something in books, it was alive and present, right here in front of her. Finally, she felt the first real movement. A group of guards began to march into position, their boots striking the pavement in perfect unison. The sound echoed through the square, and Emma felt a shiver of excitement run down her spine. She realized that this was the moment she had been waiting for, the start of a tradition that had endured through centuries. The sight of the guards moving with such precision, the sound of their rifles and the music blending perfectly, was more mesmerizing than she had imagined. She could feel her own heartbeat matching the rhythm of the ceremony, and for a moment she felt completely present in the history unfolding before her eyes. As Emma watched, she noticed small, almost imperceptible interactions among the guards. A subtle nod, a glance exchanged, a shift in stance, it all spoke of teamwork, trust, and shared responsibility. She realized that the ceremony was not only a display of pageantry, but also a demonstration of human connection, discipline, and dedication. Each guard played a role, and each movement contributed to the larger picture, creating a harmony that captivated everyone watching. By the time the first notes of the band filled the square, Emma was completely absorbed in the scene. She forgot about the cold, the crowd, and even the passing time. All that mattered was the elegance and precision of the ceremony, the dedication of the guards, and the sense of history she felt in every heartbeat. She knew she would remember this moment for the rest of her life, the first time she had truly witnessed the changing of the guard, not just as a tourist, but as someone fully present in the wonder of it all. As the first notes of the ceremonial music filled the air, Emma felt a thrill run through her entire body. The sharp, clear sound of trumpets echoed against the palace walls, while the steady beat of drums seemed to sync perfectly with the marching feet of the guards. The crowd around her hushed slightly, as if everyone instinctively understood that a remarkable moment was unfolding. Emma's eyes widened as she focused on the approaching soldiers, their movements precise, almost as if they were part of a grand dance. Each step, each turn, each motion was timed to perfection. The guards moved in a perfectly coordinated formation, their red tunics bright against the gray stone of the palace. Emma noticed the way their rifles gleamed under the morning sun, how their black boots clicked sharply against the cobblestones, and how their bearskin hats swayed slightly with each step. She realized that this was more than just a performance. It was a demonstration of discipline, of hours and hours of training, and of a respect for tradition that went far beyond mere appearances. The precision was breathtaking. A small group of tourists nearby whispered excitedly about the history of the ceremony. Emma leaned closer to listen. One of them mentioned that the changing of the guard was not just ceremonial, but also functional. It ensured that the palace was always protected, that the royal family was constantly under watchful eyes. Emma imagined the responsibility that each guard carried. It was more than standing still or marching in formation. It was about being alert, disciplined, and ready at a moment's notice, all while maintaining an appearance of flawless perfection for thousands of spectators. The music grew louder as the band approached, and Emma could see that it was not just the guards who were participating in the ceremony. The musicians themselves were dressed in uniforms that gleamed with gold embroidery, and their movements were as synchronized as the soldiers. She watched in amazement as a trumpet player lifted his instrument in perfect time with the drumbeat, the sound resonating through the square. It was a full sensory experience. The colors, the sounds, the rhythm, and even the subtle smell of polish on boots and brass instruments. Emma felt like she had stepped into another world, one that existed somewhere between the past and the present. The guide who had been speaking earlier began explaining more about the roles of the different guards. Emma listened attentively, fascinated. He explained that the guards belonged to regiments that had a long and proud history, some dating back hundreds of years. Each regiment had its own traditions, its own stories of courage, loyalty, and service. The guide pointed out small details in the uniforms, the specific badges, the patterns on the collars, the colored plumes on some hats, that indicated which regiment each soldier belonged to. Emma felt as if she were learning a secret language, a code that revealed the history and identity of each guard through subtle symbols and careful design. Emma's attention returned to the soldiers as they began to change positions. The outgoing guards marched toward the gates, their steps perfectly timed, while the new guards moved in from the side, taking their positions with flawless precision. She noticed the small gestures that connected the two groups, a nod, a slight pause, a careful alignment of rifles. There was no room for error, yet every motion seemed effortless, almost graceful. Emma felt a deep sense of admiration for the human effort behind this grand display. Each soldier was part of something much bigger than themselves, a tradition that had been carried forward through countless generations. The crowd around Emma was just as captivated. Cameras clicked constantly, but Emma found herself holding hers at her side, realizing that some moments were too beautiful to capture. They needed to be felt. She watched a child standing on a parent's shoulders, eyes wide with wonder, and she felt a connection with the little one's amazement. This was a shared experience, a moment that united strangers in awe of history and human dedication. Even though everyone came from different countries, spoke different languages, and had different stories, they all were experiencing the same magic. As the ceremony continued, Emma noticed the subtle differences between the guards. Some moved with confident ease, others with careful concentration. One young guard, in particular, seemed to take extra care with every step, his eyes focused and his posture perfect. Emma imagined the countless hours of training he must have undergone to reach this level of perfection. She wondered about his life beyond the palace, the family he might visit after duty, the friends who supported him, the personal moments that existed beyond the formal ceremony. It was a reminder that behind every uniform was a real person, with dreams, responsibilities, and dedication that went far beyond what the crowd could see. The sound of the drums intensified, and Emma felt a shiver run down her spine. The ceremonial band played a series of marching tunes that echoed through the open square, and the guards responded with precise turns, halts, and salutes. The choreography of the ceremony was mesmerizing. Emma felt as if she were watching a living story unfold, one in which every step and every note had meaning. The guards' discipline was awe-inspiring, but it was also their humanity, the small gestures, the careful attention to detail, that made the experience so captivating. Emma took a moment to observe the reactions of those around her. Some tourists whispered questions to each other, trying to make sense of the intricate movements and the complex sequence of the ceremony. Others simply stood silently, letting the spectacle unfold without distraction. Emma realized that this shared silence, this collective focus on the moment, added to the power of the experience. It was not just about seeing the changing of the guard, it was about participating in it, even if only as an observer. As the guards began their final sequences, Emma felt her excitement peak. The outgoing guards made their way to the side, while the incoming guards took their positions with exacting care. The band played a final flourish, and Emma felt the sound resonate deep within her chest. She noticed a slight smile on the face of one of the guards as he completed his movement, a tiny human detail that brought warmth to the otherwise formal ceremony. It reminded her that behind the precision and discipline, there was joy, pride, and a sense of accomplishment. The ceremony moved with a rhythm that was both steady and dramatic. Emma watched as the guards executed their drills with absolute focus, their movements synchronized perfectly with the music. The crowd's applause broke out at strategic moments, not as a disruption, but as an acknowledgement of the guards' skill and dedication. Emma joined in, clapping softly, feeling a connection not only to the guards, but also to the generations of people who had witnessed the same ceremony before her. It was as if she were part of a living chain of observers, each contributing to the energy and meaning of the moment. As the final notes of the band faded, Emma took a deep breath, savoring the lingering echoes. The guards returned to their usual positions, standing tall and composed, ready to continue their watch. Emma felt a sense of calm satisfaction. She had not only seen the changing of the guard, she had experienced it. She had observed the discipline, the history, and the human effort behind the spectacle, and she had felt the collective awe of the crowd around her. The ceremony was complete, but its impact lingered in the crisp morning air, in the sound of fading drums, and in Emma's own memory. For a few moments, Emma simply stood, absorbing the scene. She noticed the way the sunlight caught the edges of the palace gates, how the colors of the uniforms contrasted against the gray stone, and how the sound of footsteps and music had imprinted itself into her senses. She realized that this experience was more than just a tourist activity. It was a lesson in history, discipline, and the beauty of tradition. Every guard, every movement, every note of music was a reminder of the care and effort required to maintain something truly extraordinary. As she finally began to step away from the crowd, Emma felt a sense of gratitude. Gratitude for being able to witness such a magnificent display, for the dedication of the guards who made it possible, and for the shared human experience of standing among strangers, all of whom were captivated by the same story. She walked slowly, taking in the final glimpses of the palace and the guards, knowing that this memory would stay with her forever. Emma turned back for one last look at the palace, her heart still racing with excitement. She thought about the young guard who had stood with such concentration, the band that had played with such energy, and the countless others who had participated in the ceremony over the years. She realized that traditions like the changing of the guard were more than just rituals. They were bridges between the past and the present, between people and history. And she felt incredibly fortunate to have witnessed it, to have been part of a moment that would live in her memory long after she left London. After the final notes of the ceremonial music faded into the morning air, Emma felt a moment of quiet reflection. The crowd began to disperse slowly, yet she stayed where she was, captivated by the scene before her. She wanted to savor every detail, every sound, every movement she had just witnessed. The palace gates, still gleaming in the soft sunlight, seemed almost alive, holding the history of centuries within their iron and gold. Emma realized that the changing of the guard was more than a display of pageantry. It was a living story, a reminder that tradition and human effort were intertwined in remarkable ways. Emma's attention shifted as she noticed the small interactions among the guards. Even in their strict, disciplined roles, there were subtle gestures of humanity. One guard offered a slight nod to his colleague as they completed a maneuver, a silent acknowledgement of teamwork and shared responsibility. Another adjusted his hat with the faintest of movements, a small reminder that, despite the rigid formality, these were real people performing an extraordinary task. Emma marveled at how the ceremony balanced both precision and humanity, how structure and personal presence coexisted seamlessly. She turned to look at the tourists around her. Families with young children, couples holding hands, and solo travelers all seemed captivated in different ways. Some were chatting quietly, sharing facts and impressions, while others were silent, completely absorbed in the spectacle. Emma noticed a young boy pointing excitedly at the guards, tugging at his mother's sleeve, asking endless questions. The mother smiled, explaining as best she could the meaning behind the ritual. Emma felt warmth at this simple scene. It reminded her that history and tradition were not just for textbooks, but for everyone, young and old alike, to experience and appreciate firsthand. Emma walked closer to the palace gates, careful not to disrupt the small groups lingering near the perimeter. She noticed a small plaque detailing some of the palace's history, including the role of the guards in protecting the royal family. Reading it, she felt even more connected to the centuries of service that had taken place here. The guards, she realized, were part of a living continuum, each generation carrying forward the honor and responsibility of those who had come before. She imagined the countless soldiers who had trained rigorously, stood for hours under the sun or rain, and participated in ceremonies that looked much the same as what she had just witnessed. Emma's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a drum in the distance. A new group of guards was preparing for the next phase of the ceremony. The air seemed to vibrate with anticipation. Emma moved slightly to get a better view and noticed that even the smaller details were remarkable. The crisp lines of the uniforms, the polish on the boots, the gentle sway of the bearskin hats as soldiers adjusted their positions. Every motion, no matter how small, was deliberate, and Emma felt a deep respect for the dedication required to perform such a task. She watched as one guard carefully inspected his rifle, ensuring that it was perfectly aligned. Another adjusted the strap across his chest, a tiny motion that seemed insignificant but contributed to the overall precision of the formation. Emma realized that these small details, often unnoticed by the casual observer, were what made the ceremony so extraordinary. It was a reminder that excellence was not only about grand gestures, but also about careful attention to the smallest actions. As she observed, Emma noticed a few guards exchanging brief glances, almost as if communicating without words. She found this fascinating, the unspoken coordination, the trust, and understanding among them. The guide she had overheard earlier had mentioned that such ceremonies required not only skill, but also a deep sense of unity. Emma now understood what he meant. Each soldier relied on the others, and the entire performance depended on this quiet, invisible connection. It was teamwork at its highest form, combined with personal discipline and respect for tradition. Emma's gaze shifted again, this time to the crowd. She noticed an elderly couple standing quietly, holding hands, eyes fixed on the scene. A young woman beside them was sketching the guards in her notebook, capturing the elegance of their movements. Tourists with cameras were snapping pictures rapidly, but Emma felt content to simply watch and listen, taking in the experience with all her senses. She realized that everyone around her was participating in the ceremony in their own way, some through observation, some through memory-making, and some through quiet appreciation. A sudden movement caught her attention. One of the guards, a young man with sharp features and a steady posture, adjusted his position slightly and offered a small, almost imperceptible smile. Emma's heart lifted at the sight. It reminded her that even in strict roles that demanded discipline and precision, moments of individuality and humanity could shine through. She imagined the pride he must feel in representing his regiment, in being part of a ceremony that had lasted for centuries, and in carrying forward a legacy of honor and dedication. The ceremonial band began to play again, signaling the continuation of the ritual. Emma felt the music resonate deep within her. The combination of drums and trumpets, the rhythmic march of the guards, and the disciplined precision of the entire formation created an experience that was both grand and intimate. It was a moment where history, art, and human effort merged into something unforgettable. Emma felt her own heartbeat syncing with the rhythm, a subtle connection to the flow of the ceremony. Emma noticed that some guards seemed slightly more relaxed, while others maintained a strict, formal stance. The balance between formality and approachability fascinated her. The guards were symbols of authority and tradition, yet they were also human beings with awareness and presence. The ceremony, she realized, was not just about performance. It was about embodying values such as discipline, respect, and dedication. Every action, from the smallest gesture to the grandest movement, communicated these values to the audience. As the morning continued, Emma wandered a little closer to the side, observing how the guards prepared for their next set of movements. She saw them exchanging brief instructions, aligning their positions, and adjusting uniforms with meticulous care. Each movement was deliberate, reflecting hours of training and a deep understanding of the importance of precision. Emma felt admiration not only for their skill, but also for their patience and dedication. It was easy to focus on the grandeur of the ceremony, but these small moments behind the scenes made it even more impressive. Emma's attention returned to the crowd as she noticed a family trying to take a selfie with the palace in the background. The parents laughed softly as their child's hat slipped, and Emma smiled at the simple, human moments surrounding the formal event. The contrast between the disciplined guards and the lively crowd created a unique energy, one of respect and fascination intertwined with everyday life. Emma realized that part of the magic of the changing of the guard was this balance, the coexistence of ceremony and ordinary human moments, tradition and spontaneity. She walked a little further down the perimeter, finding a quieter spot to observe. From here, she could see the entire formation more clearly. The guards moved in perfect synchronization, their boots striking the pavement in time with the band. Emma noticed the way they shifted their weight, the slight tilt of their heads, and the controlled movements of their arms. Each gesture contributed to a larger, seamless performance. She felt awe at the level of skill required, and at the commitment each guard had made to maintain this tradition with such elegance. The guide nearby began to explain more about the training that guards undergo. Emma listened closely, fascinated. He described the rigorous routines, the long hours of practice, and the discipline needed to stand for hours without faltering. Emma could imagine the physical and mental endurance required. She thought about how many young soldiers had dreamed of this role, how many had trained tirelessly to achieve this level of mastery, and how each ceremony was a reflection of countless hours of dedication. Emma felt a new layer of appreciation as she watched the incoming and outgoing guards coordinate their movements. The seamless transitions, the precise alignment, and the disciplined execution were remarkable. But she also noticed moments of warmth, a subtle nod, a glance, a minor adjustment to help a colleague. These tiny human gestures reminded her that behind the discipline was a sense of camaraderie, trust, and mutual respect. It was these small acts that gave the ceremony life beyond formality. As the morning sunlight shifted, casting soft shadows across the palace grounds, Emma felt a sense of calm and connection. She watched as the guards completed another sequence and returned to their posts. The music softened, the steps slowed, and the ceremony seemed to pause for a brief, reflective moment. Emma took it all in: the elegance, the precision, the dedication, and the humanity. She realized that witnessing the changing of the guard was not just about seeing a spectacle. It was about experiencing history, understanding tradition, and appreciating the human effort that kept it alive. Finally, as the crowd began to thin, Emma lingered for a few more moments, savoring the atmosphere. She reflected on what she had seen: the teamwork of the guards, the pride in their movements, the history embedded in every detail, and the shared wonder of the audience around her. It was a memory she knew she would carry forever, a story she would retell with excitement, and a moment that connected her to the past, present, and future of a tradition that had endured for centuries. The air around Buckingham Palace was charged with excitement as Emma sensed that the ceremony was approaching its most important moment. The rhythmic sound of boots striking the pavement had become louder and more precise. The band played with an intensity that seemed to fill every corner of the square, and the guards moved with a fluidity that was both commanding and elegant. Emma felt a shiver of anticipation run down her spine. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the final handover of duty, the climax of a tradition that had been performed for centuries. Emma shifted slightly to get a better view, finding a spot where she could see the entire formation. The outgoing guards were marching toward their assigned positions with the same disciplined precision she had admired throughout the morning. Their faces were serious, their movements controlled, but there was a quiet pride in the way they carried themselves. Emma thought about the countless hours of training, the years of service, and the dedication that had brought them to this exact moment. It was awe-inspiring to see human effort and history converge in such a seamless display. The incoming guards began their approach from the opposite side of the square. Emma watched closely as they moved in perfect synchronization, their red tunics bright and their bearskin hats towering above. Every step was deliberate, every motion calculated, yet there was an undeniable grace to their movements. She could see the focus in their eyes, the determination in their posture, and the discipline that allowed them to perform flawlessly under the scrutiny of thousands of spectators. Emma felt her own heartbeat quicken as the two groups drew closer to one another. The band played a series of triumphant notes, announcing that the handover was about to begin. Emma noticed how the guards seemed to communicate with each other through subtle gestures, brief nods, small adjustments, and careful alignment of their rifles. The level of coordination was astonishing. She realized that this was not just a performance but a demonstration of trust and teamwork. Each guard depended on the others to perform their roles flawlessly, and every movement had a purpose. Emma felt a sense of wonder at the precision and dedication required to maintain such a long-standing tradition. As the two groups met near the center of the square, Emma observed the minor details that made the ceremony so remarkable. The outgoing guards passed their duties with exacting care, their rifles held with perfect form, their steps in time with the drumbeats. The incoming guards responded with equal precision, taking their positions seamlessly. Emma noticed a small gesture, a slight bow of the head, a careful adjustment of a strap, that spoke volumes about the professionalism and pride of the soldiers. These tiny moments, almost invisible to the casual observer, were what made the ceremony extraordinary. The crowd around Emma erupted into quiet applause, a respectful acknowledgement of the skill and dedication of the guards. Children clapped their hands with excitement, parents smiled, and tourists whispered in awe. Emma felt a deep sense of connection to the audience, realizing that everyone there, regardless of age or background, was sharing a unique experience. The energy in the square was electric, yet it was tempered by respect for the tradition unfolding before them. Emma felt as if she were part of a living story, one that had been repeated countless times, yet never lost its magic. Emma's gaze shifted to the band as they played a particularly powerful tune. The music seemed to swell in the air, echoing off the palace walls, and she could feel the vibration in her chest. The combination of music, precise movements, and ceremonial attire created a sense of grandeur that was almost overwhelming. She noticed the way the guards' boots clicked in perfect unison, the shine of their brass buttons, and the subtle sway of their bearskin hats. Every detail contributed to a spectacle that was as much about beauty and discipline as it was about history and tradition. As the ceremony reached its peak, Emma focused on the outgoing guards. She noticed the small glances they exchanged, a silent acknowledgement of a job well done. There was a sense of completion in their movements, a quiet pride in the way they had carried out their duties. Emma thought about the young guard she had noticed earlier, imagining the feelings he must have experienced in this climactic moment, the culmination of training, focus, and dedication. She felt admiration for the soldiers, not just for their skill, but for their ability to maintain composure and elegance under pressure. The incoming guards moved into their final positions, and Emma watched as they performed a series of precise drills. The rhythm of the drums and the sound of trumpets filled the square, creating a sense of momentum that carried the entire ceremony forward. Emma felt her excitement grow as she realized that she was witnessing not just a performance, but a living tradition that had been preserved through generations. Every motion, every note, and every detail of the uniform spoke of history, pride, and discipline. Emma noticed how the guards maintained their focus, even as they were observed by hundreds of people. She saw a slight adjustment here, a subtle nod there, and she realized that these gestures reflected not only training but also respect for their role for each other and for the history they represented. The ceremony was not just about marching and music. It was about honor, tradition, and human connection. Emma felt a deep appreciation for the way the guards carried these values with them, every day, through a demanding and precise routine. As the handover neared its conclusion, the outgoing guards performed their final maneuvers, moving with a combination of strength and grace. The incoming guards responded in perfect harmony, completing their sequence with impeccable timing. Emma felt a wave of emotion at the sight. The ceremony, she realized, was more than visual splendor. It was a celebration of dedication, discipline, and continuity. The guards were not just performing for the crowd. They were honoring a centuries-old tradition and each other's efforts. The crowd's applause grew louder as the final notes of the band rang out. Emma joined in, clapping softly, feeling a sense of connection to everyone around her and to the history that was being honored in that moment. She looked at the guards, standing tall and composed, aware of their role in preserving this tradition. Emma felt a profound respect for the men and women who devoted themselves to this service, recognizing that their commitment extended far beyond the minutes of ceremony she had witnessed. Emma took a moment to reflect on what she had experienced. She thought about the meticulous training, the careful attention to detail, and the teamwork required to execute the ceremony flawlessly. She thought about the countless guards who had performed the ritual over the years, maintaining the same discipline and pride. And she thought about the audience, people from all walks of life, sharing in a moment of collective awe and appreciation. The changing of the guard, she realized, was more than a tradition. It was a living story of human effort, dedication, and respect. As the morning sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the palace square, Emma continued to watch the guards settle into their new positions. She noticed the subtle differences between the soldiers. Some were older and experienced, their movements confident and measured. Others were younger, careful yet full of energy. Each contributed to the overall harmony of the ceremony, creating a balance of experience, skill, and dedication. Emma felt inspired by the way individuals, each with their own strengths and personalities, could come together to create something so precise and beautiful. The ceremonial band began to play a softer, concluding piece, signaling the end of this phase of the ritual. Emma took a deep breath, feeling a sense of completion and satisfaction. She had witnessed the climax of the changing of the guard, the moment when tradition, precision, and human effort were brought together in perfect harmony. She realized that the ceremony was not just a display for tourists. It was a celebration of history, discipline, and the values that had guided generations of guards. Emma's eyes lingered on the outgoing guards as they began to leave the square, their steps steady, their posture proud. She imagined the sense of accomplishment they must feel, knowing that they had performed their duties with honor and precision. And as she watched the incoming guards take their posts, fully alert and ready to continue their watch, she felt a profound respect for the ongoing nature of the tradition. It was a reminder that history was not static. It was alive, carried forward by people who dedicated themselves to maintaining its integrity. The crowd slowly began to disperse, yet Emma stayed for a few more moments, savoring the atmosphere. She felt the lingering echoes of music and marching footsteps, the gentle warmth of the morning sun, and the collective energy of those who had shared in the experience. She reflected on the precision, discipline, and dedication that she had witnessed, and she realized that the changing of the guard was more than a spectacle. It was a living testament to the values of honor, respect, and teamwork. Finally, Emma turned to leave, but she paused one last time to take in the full scene. The palace gates gleamed in the sunlight, the guards stood with composed dignity, and the square seemed to hold the energy of centuries of tradition. She knew that this memory would stay with her forever, a vivid, living story of discipline, pride, and human effort, and a moment she had been privileged to witness firsthand. As the crowd began to disperse and the square gradually quieted, Emma lingered near Buckingham Palace, unwilling to let the moment end. The excitement of the morning had settled into a calm, reflective atmosphere. She stood there, letting her gaze wander over the palace's elegant facade, taking in the intricate details of the iron gates and the soft glow of the sun on the cream-colored stone. The sounds of the city had returned, the distant hum of traffic, the soft chatter of pedestrians. But for Emma, the palace still felt like a world apart, a place suspended in history and tradition. She thought back to every moment she had witnessed, the disciplined precision of the guards, the synchronized movements of the band, the subtle gestures that revealed the humanity behind the uniforms. Emma realized that the changing of the guard was more than a visual spectacle. It was a story told through movement, music, and attention to detail. Every step of the soldiers, every note from the band, and every gesture of acknowledgement between the guards carried meaning. It was a story of dedication, of pride in one's duty, and of the continuity of a centuries-old tradition. Emma walked slowly along the perimeter of the square, observing the guards as they resumed their regular positions. Their movements had become slightly more relaxed now that the formal ceremony had concluded, but their focus remained evident. She noticed one of the younger guards adjusting his uniform, a small action that seemed almost casual, yet still demonstrated the discipline ingrained in him through rigorous training. Emma thought about the commitment it must take to maintain such standards day after day, often under the watchful eyes of thousands of spectators. The thought filled her with admiration and respect. She paused near a small group of tourists who were talking quietly among themselves. Some were taking photos of the palace from different angles, while others were sketching the scene in notebooks. Emma smiled, realizing that everyone was processing the experience in their own way. For some, it was about capturing the memory. For others, it was about appreciating the artistry and history. Emma herself felt that simply being present, absorbing every detail, was the most meaningful way to honor the tradition she had just witnessed. As she continued to observe, Emma noticed small human moments among the guards. One older soldier, his face weathered with experience, exchanged a brief nod with a colleague, a silent acknowledgement of shared responsibility. A younger guard seemed to adjust his bearskin hat slightly, a gesture so minor that it might have gone unnoticed by anyone else, yet it spoke to his awareness of the importance of appearance and precision. Emma was struck by how these subtle actions revealed the humanity behind the ceremony, reminding her that even in the most disciplined roles, individual presence and care mattered deeply. Emma's thoughts turned inward as she reflected on her own experience. She had arrived at Buckingham Palace filled with curiosity and excitement, eager to witness a famous tradition. But now, having watched the ceremony unfold with all its layers of meaning, she felt a profound sense of connection, not just to the history of the guards, but to the human effort, discipline, and dedication that made the tradition possible. It was a reminder that history is alive, carried forward by people who honor it with every action and gesture. The morning had grown warmer, and the sun cast gentle shadows across the square. Emma noticed the reflections of the palace gates glinting in the sunlight, creating a sense of timeless beauty. She thought about the generations of guards who had performed this ceremony, imagining their footsteps echoing through the same square, their faces set with the same concentration and pride. The realization that she was part of a long line of witnesses added depth to her experience, making it feel even more special. Emma turned her attention to the crowd that remained. Families were chatting quietly, children pointing at guards with excitement, and tourists were capturing last-minute photographs. She noticed how people of all ages and backgrounds were united by their appreciation for the ceremony. It was a shared human experience, one that transcended language, nationality, and culture. Emma felt a sense of warmth knowing that traditions like this had the power to connect people, to create moments of collective awe and admiration. Her gaze returned to the guards. She watched as they continued their watch, their movements subtle but deliberate. Every shift in stance, every adjustment of uniform, and every careful step carried a sense of purpose. Emma realized that the ceremony did not end with the formal handover. It extended into the ongoing duty of the guards, who maintained their focus and vigilance long after the crowd had dispersed. The continuity of their work was a testament to the dedication required to uphold such a tradition, and Emma felt deeply inspired by their commitment. As she walked along the edge of the square, Emma noticed a few guards interacting briefly with one another. A slight smile here, a quiet word there, tiny glimpses of camaraderie that revealed the human side of the disciplined soldiers. She reflected on how important these small moments must be, providing reassurance and connection amid the formal demands of their roles. Emma thought about the young guard she had noticed during the peak of the ceremony, imagining the pride he must feel in fulfilling his duty with such precision. It reminded her that behind every impressive performance was a network of support, trust, and shared responsibility. Emma paused near a fountain at the corner of the square, taking a deep breath and letting the sounds of the city wash over her. She thought about the contrast between the quiet stillness of the guards and the lively energy of the crowd, realizing that both elements were essential to the magic of the experience. The ceremony was not just about observing. It was about participating in a moment of history, feeling its rhythm, and appreciating its significance. Emma understood that her presence, along with everyone else's, was part of what made the ritual meaningful, an audience that witnessed, acknowledged, and respected the tradition. She thought about the lessons the morning had offered. The changing of the guard was not only a display of precision and pageantry, but also a reminder of the value of discipline, dedication, and respect for history. It showed the importance of working together, of understanding one's role within a larger system, and of honoring traditions that connect generations. Emma felt a renewed sense of appreciation for the small acts of care and attention that make great achievements possible, whether in ceremonies, work, or everyday life. As the crowd thinned even further, Emma decided to walk closer to the gates one last time. The palace stood silent now, majestic and calm, and the guards remained attentive and composed. She could see the careful alignment of their uniforms, the gleam of their buttons, and the deliberate movements that reflected hours of practice. Emma felt a quiet awe at the balance between ceremony and ongoing responsibility, the harmony between tradition and daily vigilance. It was a living testament to dedication and human effort. Emma noticed a family taking a group photograph near the gates, their smiles wide and joyful. She smiled back, feeling a connection to their excitement. Even though she was experiencing the ceremony in her own reflective way, she realized that the shared joy and wonder of the audience added to the richness of the moment. The changing of the guard was not only about the soldiers, it was about everyone present, collectively witnessing and appreciating a tradition that had endured for centuries. Taking a deep breath, Emma reflected on the sensory details she had absorbed throughout the morning. The crisp air, the rhythmic sounds of marching boots, the triumphant notes of the band, the vibrant red of the uniforms, and the solemn dignity of the guards all blended into a memory that felt vivid and alive. She knew that this experience would stay with her forever, a story she could retell with passion and excitement. It was more than a tourist visit. It was a lesson in history, humanity, and the enduring power of tradition. Finally, Emma began to leave the palace square, walking slowly and savoring the last glimpses of the guards and the palace gates. She felt a sense of gratitude for being able to witness such a remarkable ceremony, for the dedication of the soldiers who made it possible, and for the shared human experience of awe and admiration. As she walked toward the streets of London, she carried with her the memory of disciplined precision, collective harmony, and the quiet moments of humanity that had made the day unforgettable. Emma glanced back one final time. The palace gates reflected the morning light, the guards stood with quiet dignity, and the square seemed almost suspended in time. She realized that traditions like the changing of the guard were bridges between past and present, connecting people across generations. Every movement, every note, and every gesture had told a story, of history, of pride, and of human dedication. Emma felt privileged to have witnessed it, to have been part of the shared experience, and to carry the memory forward as a personal treasure. As she continued her walk through the bustling streets of London, Emma reflected on the lessons of the morning. She understood that life, like the changing of the guard, requires patience, discipline, attention to detail, and respect for the efforts of others. She thought about the pride and dedication of the guards, the coordination and harmony that made the ceremony possible, and the simple joy of being present in a moment of history. It was a day that had deepened her appreciation for both tradition and humanity, and she knew she would remember it with clarity and warmth for the rest of her life. Even as she turned a corner and the palace faded from view, Emma carried the sights, sounds, and emotions of the morning with her. The memory of disciplined guards, triumphant music, and a crowd united in awe remained vivid. She knew that witnessing the changing of the guard was not just a sightseeing experience. It was a lesson in honor, dedication, and shared humanity. And she felt grateful that she had been there to witness a tradition that would continue for generations, a moment that had connected her to history, to the present, and to countless others who had experienced the same wonder.